Oh my goodness. Welcome to the UpLevel Podcast. Kumu Ramsay, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really was looking forward to it once you suggested the opportunity. Always wonderful.
Well, in the introductory, the listeners have heard how we connected, and I'm sure some of that will come through our time together. As you know, we've been in this exploration of right relationship. And one of the reasons we came together, I was able to meet you, was because that was part of like the exploration. There was different language being used. And of course, you have so much wisdom and knowledge on this matter. So let's dive in and start with what is your definition of right relationship?
Well, first of all, thank you again. And our experience and time together in the exploration was just fabulous. And I'm always appreciative. As they say, sometimes when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
So true.
And in this case, I learned a lot from everyone that was there. So thank you for that, which I think speaks to being in right relation. It's acknowledging, as we say in Hawaii, the ha'aha, which is the term for humility. And also being in, we call ahonui, the spirit of kindness and gentleness that allows us to receive as well as to share. Now, these two terms are embedded in a much greater principle, which we live by, which is called aloha. And so I would equate or include this notion of right relation is when we are living, being, and sharing aloha. This notion of leaving people whole, better than when we found them. And in the process, leaving better ourselves. When we're in right relation, we do no harm. We leave people whole, not in one. And I really believe that it is a reciprocal process, an agreement of reciprocity, which has no words. It's just a knowing, an extending of oneself, and knowing that in the process of doing so, the benefits return to us multiple times over. And when you're in right relationship, I think we begin to see that and experience that more often.
And we've talked about how, and our listeners who are following along, we're exploring this because we believe this is one of the ways forward, this moment in time that humanity is in. And can you tell us a bit about the prophecies of this time?
Yeah, thank you for that. I've been very fortunate to have been mentored by numerous elders. We refer to them as kupuna. And the Hawaiian term puna refers to source, and ku is the notion of standing up, being human, kanaka. So these kupuna, these elders, at some point recognized the empty coconut that they had in front of them and decided that they needed to fill it. And I was accommodating and allowed them to do so. And I think it's just acknowledging the expansiveness of being in relation, to being open, to being responsive. And what they were able to share with me was there would be a time in our lifetime, or at least my lifetime, that the world would experience dis-ease, disorder, disconnection, a lot of discontentment. But the dis-ease and illness of physical, mental, spiritual, and emotion, deep sense of longing for something, whatever that might be. But it was a particular elder, Kupuna Pilahipaki, who was known as the keeper of Hawaii's secrets, whom I spent many hours with, many days prior to her transition. And it was then that she shared with me specifically that she believed that it was the healing of Aloha and that Hawaii would play a significant role in helping to restore that order of health, of what we call Ola, life and health, to an ailing island Earth, or what we would refer to as Mother. So numerous elders from various traditions share the same prophecy that at some point in time, there would be what we call a huli, a shift. And maybe not a physical shift, as some people are concerned about, with magnetic poles and all those kinds of things. Not to discount any of that. But if anything, it would be a huge spiritual, mental, and emotional shift. A dimensional one, if you would.
Yes.
Acknowledging and recognizing that, one, we are out of sync with our environment around us. And the more effort we put into trying to control it, we're actually demonstrating a lack of control.
Oh, yeah.
Much like the idea of placing one's hand on a pond to stop the ripples, only to produce more with every effort. And so that was the message to them, is at some point in time, this aloha of acknowledging our relationship to Aina, land, to that which feeds us, which is Mother, that in restoring that relationship, that we would then restore order.
And how do you think it's going in this moment?
Well, if we look at what's immediately in front of me, it's a head scratcher.
Yeah.
But I also subscribe to the idea, at least the physical side of things, as spiritual beings experiencing a physical, experiment.
See, yes.
But if you take a bowl and you roll it on its edge on a table, it'll roll, it'll wobble. And just before it stops, it vibrates extremely quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a high level of vibration, and then it stops. My senses were there. We're getting close to that stop.
Yeah.
Now, whether it's a violent one or a one of ease, it really relies and depends on each of us,
Mm-hmm.
on how we ride it, how we lean into it,
Yeah.
and accept it. So I think we're at that point where that shifting is happening. And as they say, in order for there to be change, sometimes we have to destroy or release old ideas, thoughts, and experiences in order to embrace new ones. The idea of placing something in a hand that's already closed makes no sense.
Mm.
So we'll need to open our hands, open our minds, open our hearts to receive something new, which means releasing something old.
Mm.
And as comfortable as we may be with that old, it's what's holding us back. It's holding us back as we hold on to it. So I think it's part of that, for sure. We're in that space right now.
And when we were together, some language that is reminding me of what you just said is it's important for us to reduce the dependency on the outside, because proximity to happiness, or we could replace that with wholeness or right relationship, starts within. It starts within oneself.
Absolutely. And I'm a strong advocate for the idea of an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
It really starts inside. And there isn't anything that we're experiencing externally that isn't translated, received, or captured by our senses, the multiple senses, the physical ones as well as the extrasensory ones. At some point in time, that information is received internally that triggers a memory, an idea, a thought, an emotion. that we then respond to, react to, or freeze, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
All of that's coming from within us. So it doesn't really matter what's happening outside, but it's how we translate that and how we relate to that. And if our reaction or response is predicated on the way others behave and or what the externality is demanding from us, then we really become victims of those externalities as well as those perceptions, ideas, and expectations of others. And that becomes more so a problem when we haven't identified that intrinsic, that internal compass that we may use regardless of the maps that may be put in front of us. Those of our parents and our elders, and or for those new landscapes that we may be entering into. So yeah, it's all an inside job. And whatever we're carrying with us, our memories, our expectations, our fears and anxieties, all of those tend to shape information that in and of itself really has no intention other than just to be. Right?
So in your wisdom and in the wisdom that was passed on to you from your elders and the prophecy of these times, how does that philosophy that our inside world creates our outside world, how does that come into play in this moment if we are seeing such dis-ease, destruction, divisiveness? What's the parallel there?
I think the idea is that if it's bothering us, whatever is bothering us, again, reminding ourselves that it's coming from within us. The stimulation of that is outside, whether it's light, sound, a word, a behavior of a particular individual. It's triggering something inside of us. And we choose to maintain, retain, or release the beliefs and assumptions associated with that. Now, that doesn't make anything that is bad better, but it certainly changes the way we respond to it. I'm not trying to make bad better. I don't need better bad, right?
Yeah.
But how do we learn from, take that information, and then make necessary adjustments in our personal behavior? So if I find myself being triggered by these things, then I must look at my attachments. Why am I so attached to the outcome of this or to the words that this person uses? Because someone else using those words may not bother me. And yet when this person says it, it does. Well, simply in our case, it could be because they're in a position of influence, right? And those people in influence are changing the world around us that we happen to be living in. And once again, we're choosing to live into that space. Now we can also choose to create new spaces if we want to.
Yeah.
And or destroy the old ones, the ones that we're in, which some people are doing right now.
Yeah. Well, you said when we were together, it starts with the little behaviors each day. And that we never own anything except our breath.
That's right.
I mean, that's some wisdom drop right there, Kumu. Like,
we don't even own that to a certain degree.
We don't even own that.
Yeah, that's a reciprocal relationship. I give it comes back to me. If I don't let it go, it won't come back, and neither will I. So I think it challenges us to look at the assumptions and the beliefs that we've always lived with. What is the reality? And I know we hear it all the time. People, well, this is not real. That's all an illusion. To a certain degree, it is, right? But for those of us that are hard-lined, hardwired, linear thinkers, looking for causal relationships, that's much more difficult to subscribe to the spiritual principles that we're talking about. It's not a bad thing. It's just it takes a shift in consciousness and recognizing that what I'm seeing in front of me is a reflection of what my aspirations, needs, desires. But when I no longer need that, I will stop seeing those things. One way or another, I'm either going to be replaced and I'm no longer in the place that I'm in to experience that, or I'm going to transition, and I don't necessarily mean leaving the planet physically, which could be an option. But the idea that I can move into a new mind space headspace, if you would,
Yeah.
a worldview, so that I view the world differently. Challenging the assumptions and the beliefs that others hold, and begin to adopt new ones. As one writer who lived here in Hawaii for Joseph Campbell, he talked about the need for new myths,
Mm.
and many of us are subscribing to old myths.
Yes.
That probably need to be set aside and replaced with new ones. And I think in doing so, we begin to shift that reality, or what we now refer to reality. So
Let's talk about Ho'oponopono and how that is such a potent, powerful remedy for what you're saying. So for folks who resonate with these teachings, from my perspective, and please tell me if I'm tracking this, it is a practice to help one restore right relationship with self, others, community, the bigger thing, whatever that might be for them. Is that a fair statement?
absolutely. And at the risk of oversimplifying it, I would suggest that if you could go to the whiteboard on your kitchen wall every morning, and with an eraser simply erase yesterday's agenda, things to do, right? And create a new agenda each day. Essentially, that's Ho'oponopono, going up and erasing. Because if you didn't do it yesterday, you want to do it today, well, you can erase it and decide what you want to do today instead of trying to catch up for tomorrow. So the Ho'oponopono process is a spiritual eraser to a certain degree, really in communion with divinity, with the grand creator, the architect, if you would, the grand healer, who enables us to use that eraser in times of dis-ease, disorder, and disconnection, and discontent. So we can literally go in spiritually, erase these old memories, the ones that hold us back, especially if we've learned and we're moving through them and we're taking them as lessons rather than as punishments, right? So I think the process is a cleansing, healing process, not just one of redirecting my mind for a moment by utilizing mantras. While mantras do work in the moment, the process of Ho'oponopono, as we utilize it here and as was shared with me by these elders, is literally a cleansing process that is like time travel. I'm erasing the past events, forgiving my ancestors as well as myself. And in the process of doing that, if you can imagine a hook being released and everything connected to that hook also being released. So by releasing my past, I am freeing myself in the present, which then gives my descendants a clearer future, right?
Can you give us it's so beautiful, and I can see how it's time travel, especially the way you contextualize it and you teach it. And if we could apply it, say, to a work environment, in the context of, say, like a people manager and their direct report or their team, how might they apply Ho'oponopono in that context?
Sure, without going back centuries, but just in one's own resume. You can look back at how your ancestors, meaning those that came before you, your previous supervisor, your classmate, your parents, how they began to influence response, behavior, and relationships. If you've done something out of order and have never really addressed it, put it back into order, we may find ourselves making these minor adjustments in our daily lives, right? To avoid the pain or the discomfort or the revelation that maybe I misbehaved. And rather than dealing with it, we try to avoid it. And eventually it grows and reveals itself in some painful ways. And so the process of Ho'oponopono then is to acknowledge, one, that I may have been the source of someone else's discomfort, which I am now experiencing by the words, the actions, and behaviors of the people in front of me, right? Now, it doesn't change the fact that there are angry people in the world or people that are in pain. But what it does shift is an internal acknowledgement of why is it that I'm seeing this? Right?
Mm.
What criteria of decision making does my decision screen have that continues to bring me to an environment where this kind of behavior is waiting for me? What is it about me that allows me to attract knuckleheads? Right? Who put me on earth to heal knuckleheads?
Mhm.
Or the other way around? What is it about me that knuckleheads attract?
Mhm.
I'm attracting. It's a reciprocal relationship.
Mhm.
So at some point in time, if I can release that need, that desire, that opportunity, then they can go be someone else's knucklehead,
Yeah.
right? Or stop having to do it at all because now they've achieved their particular mission in life, which is to help enlighten me, which requires me to recognize that I was the student here, not the teacher. That's what I was saying earlier. Um, but that really requires a shift. It goes back to the humility of recognizing,
Mhm.
and acknowledging that our deepest prayers are often answered this way. Oh, I really need to find some patience. And you find yourself stuck on the freeway every day, during rush hour. That's a simple response to a prayer. I need to find patience.
Right. So you get put into the traffic jam every day as a place to practice Ho'oponopono.
You get to practice patience and Ho'oponopono.
Yeah.
I wanna be much more resilient when it comes to anger, and be more peaceful. Well, you may find yourself around some very angry people because it requires an inner peace to be surrounded by people who are externally angry. So it's a paradox for some people.
Yeah.
It's a shift in consciousness. So be careful what you ask for,
Yeah.
because I believe the universe is very willing to respond and help us, as long as we're clear. When we're confused, it may not.
Well, and what I'm tuning into, what it really requires is to slow down, to notice, hey, this pattern keeps repeating itself.
Correct.
And, unfortunately, modern culture in the West, specifically, the pace and the productivity and the year over year stretch targets, it what it does is it gets us further away from right relationship and disconnects us even more from the abilities, the natural abilities to say, oh, look at me creating my reality, right? So people are so far away from that teaching and that philosophy. And so how do folks, maybe they're listening and they're like, oh, I'm ready to start operating, if you will, on this type of timeline. What's the guidance there?
Well, I think it's referring to self again, knowing oneself well enough to acknowledge that I am being human versus human being something,
Mm.
or a human becoming without ever being. And I think that's a question what am I being today? Am I being angry? Am I being happy? Or am I chasing something? Am I trying to become something? And last, to your point, in our society today, everyone's trying to become something that they weren't yesterday, right? Whether it's an influencer, or whether it's a healer, or whether it's a powerful executive,
Mhm.
whatever that metric may be, it's still an outside thing that then gets measured internally by, I feel good about that. But if that feeling, if that sense of accomplishment is reliant on that externality, we go back to the previous conversation. We then become victims of those externalities, right?
And that's what we're seeing en masse. I mean, that if we're simplifying it, it's that.
Precisely. And I think the question is, what is enough? I don't think we've become satisfied. There's no satisfaction that there is such a thing called enough. More is always a thing. And we use terms like growth. How is your company doing? What's your growth rate?
Yeah.
Right. And it's uncontrolled growth. Just because I'm growing means I'm successful. Also, the notion that I'm busy, therefore I am productive. I'm moving, therefore I'm alive. And if I don't move, then I'm not alive. I'm not keeping up. And then the definition of the human race begins to really take shape.
Mm-hmm.
What are we racing to? Where are we going? Why are we going there? Only to sit back and look back and reminisce at, wait a minute, what did I miss? On the spectrum of things, people talk, well, someday I'll retire, for those that have that in their vocabulary. So what does that look like?
Yeah.
Now that I'm there, I sit back and I reminisce. I retread, right?
Yeah.
I run the old images and I think,
Yeah.
well, what did I do? Is that what we're doing? Or rather living through all that and making every moment the memory that you want to maintain, right?
Dropping the mic, Kumu, right there. We talked about KPIs when we were together, and it feels really relevant to where we are in the conversation. And again, a lot of our listeners are inside organizations or they're serving organizations. And I love how you spoke about metrics of success. And I think that's part of what we're saying is leaders today, will you have the courage to question the metrics of success and to ask different questions and to set different KPIs in service of this evolution that we're underway? And the KPI you said, one of the ones you said is, how many people did we feed today? And I get so excited. I went back to my business partner. I was like, this needs to be a KPI for our business. And it's not just about, we were able to feed our families. It's also the other people in our ecosystem who were able to be fed because of the work, but not just financially, not just food, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. Like, it's again expanding our idea of like prosperity and abundance. So teach us about KPIs in this way of like right relationship.
Well, I think it goes back to what you just said. If we're living in a world of scarcity versus a world of abundance, then we develop KPIs to be consistent with that belief, right? So it starts what our overall belief is, that I'm sitting in a place with less, therefore I need more to have more because there's less of it to go around. But if you live in a world of abundance with the concept that everything I do is additive, that I'm living in a world of expansion, I'm living by the law of expansion. I expand others, I expand. Then all of a sudden that begins to shift. I can begin to look more at how others are experiencing my gifts and me theirs. And all of a sudden, everything begins to grow. Now, for those that may subscribe to old biblical terms of the fish and the loaves of bread, I think that's an example of that story making, that when we are operating in that space, everyone eats, right? Everyone is fed, regardless of what limits we have in front of us. We don't let those limits decide what our capacity is. And I think that's the reverse of it. So I have capacity, but it's only good for what's in front of me, which kind of ignores your capacity, right? So I think that's it. I think if we're operating in a place of abundance, that there is enough and that you can have more without me having less, then I think we begin to look at different ways. And I think the story I shared with you was how my grandmother's inquiry every time I came over to see her had nothing to do with my physical activities, my accomplishment for the day, but she always asked me whether I was hungry, if I wanted something to eat. And it was her value, her virtue, her desired outcome, that I would never leave her home hungry,
Hmm.
and that I would always have something to provide me with nutrition so that I could accomplish what it was I was going to do. But I was not going to go hungry, right? And that was her metric.
Right. Not under her tutelage, not under her leadership. You would not go hungry. Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, how can we invite leaders in every context to reconnect to that elder energy of the metric of don't let anyone leave hungry. And it's not just about food. This is the expansion of our ideas around community and just having people step more into their purpose, a kind exchange with somebody.
Well, Christy, I think it comes back to, again, the tools that we're using, right? And if my tool is a hammer, as they say, everything is a nail.
Yeah.
Right. And how do we begin to shift that? And I think part of it is recognizing that it's the outcome, not the process. And yet so many of us in business, especially entrepreneurs, are working on their businesses, right? Outside, to work on something. It's like living on your house, living on your car, rather than being in it. And then utilizing tools that have you focused outside of it while you're in it. Right?
Yeah.
So the metric for many of us, especially in the world of economics, driven by economics, the scarcity, fear, there's a lot of that. We subscribe to accounting procedures. We have all these different technologies and programs.
And language.
To be better accounting practitioners with very little accountability involved in that accounting. And so when we go back to community, or we bring community forward as a goal and as a value set, then we operate from accountability practices and expectations that then embrace accounting procedures that then enable us to live up to our accountability. So we're still doing the same thing, but we're just reordering it, right? So at the end of the day, as a leader, I can say and ask the question, has everyone eaten? Is everyone rested? Is everyone healthy? And if the answer is a resounding yes, then that's a reflection that we made decisions and we established practices and policies that resulted in everyone eating, no one going hungry. And not a false sense that look at how much I accumulated today and ignoring the fact that I was taking bread out of people's mouths in the process to accumulate this factory full of bread, right? And you can use bread on any metaphor you want. But oftentimes we fool ourselves into believing how successful we are because on our return on investment, right? But it doesn't show the impact of that investment.
Yeah.
Which is a lack of integrity.
Yeah.
Right? So I like to shift the return on investment, ROI, to a return on integrity.
Hello.
See? And so because my outside and my inside are consistent, that's pono. So I know our business is thriving while our community is also thriving, not just trying to survive. Right?
Aloha.
Aloha. That's it. That's the positive thing right there.
That's it.
And again, can there be enough? Is there enough? And as a leader, subscribing to the notion that we lead to feed and feed to lead. And to your point, feeding comes in many ways, shapes, and forms. Mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, any of that. And I think leaders who are extremely successful are also great followers. In order to be a good leader, you must be a good follower, whether you're following a trend, following the needs of what's going on in your community, and like my elders would say, listening, right? Paying attention to what's going on out there so that we can make better decisions and respond to the needs of our communities and our internal community being our companies or organizations. But they're part of a larger ecosystem. And so becoming successful unto ourselves in the absence of caring for the ecosystem, not only is it selfish, but it's self-destructive. At some point in time, we end up eating ourselves because that's all that's left. We haven't fed anything outside of ourselves. So therefore, the only thing we can consume eventually is ourselves. That's the cannibalism that, we've talked about in the past. It's not just the physical cannibalism, but I think it's fiscal cannibalism. When we actually will run part of our company into the ground so that we can show a liability on our balance sheet. And there's no such thing as balance. We're using terms on these sheets. We're going to create a balance sheet. I'm going to completely destroy that company and get the liability to write off my tax. It's just absurd.
It is absurd.
Where we need to start being much more realistic about it and saying, what are we really doing here? This is just a show game. We're just moving things around to satisfy what? What are we really satisfying at that point in time?
One of the teachings you offered me in a private one-on-one was around this concept of spiritual debt and or carrying debt for our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, I've been sitting with it and I'm really working it because it not addressing that, like for me personally, and anyone who's listening to this, that this might resonate, means I keep repeating the same thing my ancestors did. It might look different. It's different contexts, different times, but I don't get to evolve the lineage. I don't get to be like a conscious co-creator that is bringing the lineage forward, right? And instead, I'm just repeating cycles, but like covering it up differently. And I think a lot of what we're talking about right now is this debt. We're saying people are understanding it from an accounting standpoint. Let's call it the goal line. But there's the soul line debt, the spiritual debt that we carry that we don't talk about. And what if we did? What if we realized there's both happening all the time, and the impact of carrying this energetic, spiritual being debt is huge and soul crushing.
It is. Yeah. And it's, again, something we pass on. So, and as much as we're living the experience and expectations of our ancestors, we then pass that on to our descendants. And you can frame those two terms as new employees, new successors. It doesn't have to be a DNA child.
That's what I'm getting from this. Ancestors aren't just like blood lineage. It's really the people that are around us and that we're, maybe leading or feeding or, okay.
Right. And the narratives that we keep playing, the stories of, well, my grandfather had to walk through the snow for 10 miles every day to get to school, and I've got to pay the same dues. Where's my snow?
Yeah,
so in the absence of snow, I create stuff that drags me around because I'm now attached to that memory.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, which is, well, if it happened to me, then I'm going to have to leave this drudgery for the next guy because then they'll appreciate it more when they earn it. It's these silly narratives, rather than saying, how can I make your life more enjoyable by learning from my lessons so that you can learn more and we can keep expanding from that standpoint. But there's a tendency to replay those old records, right? Those old recordings that either I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, or in order for me to earn this, I need to have this, right? And or we come from experiences of scarcity for whatever reason, not blaming our ancestors, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, but they lived in a time where they did the best they could. I would like to think all of us are doing the best we can. But if our best is predicated on the last person's best, then are we really achieving our best?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I would ask us to look at ourselves today. If any of us are saying we're trying to improve the world around us, a world that is created by those before us who wanted a better world for us. Their definition of better is what we're living with today. And yet, here we are trying to improve it because either we're not satisfied or we're saying, what were they thinking? Right?
Yeah.
And oddly, we're using the same criteria of thinking that they passed on to us to assess what they did and consider it less than, and therefore we're going to add more to it. It becomes a cycle that we fall into, and there's a hubris to it, right? So sometimes it's about becoming empty and not always being full, not chasing knowledge, but listening to wisdom and combining those two things to create the next reality, the next happening. But all too often, we're looking for an answer, but we haven't formulated the right questions.
And that's it.
Like that. Something like that.
I mean, what can you share with us about how you have become who you are in this moment? And I know we need another hour, but or more, but what's the kind of, I'm just so curious about, I've been lucky to hear some of the origin stories, but people listening haven't. So what can you share?
Well, I'd like to think I'm still becoming. People ask me where I grew up, and I'm not sure I've grown up yet, but I'm working on it. I have to credit the elders, my family, my parents, because whether they knew it or not, they consciously made a decision to shift the trajectory that our families had been on. Because I can look back and see what trajectory the families had been on. And where I am currently is not where those trajectories were. We're going to. So I credit them because at some point in time, they decided that a 2-degree shift was required to create the 2,000-mile shift that I'm now living from that prior reality. So I always acknowledge those elders who, for whatever reason, whether it was to avoid pain or to create pleasure, made decisions that allowed me to make better decisions. Whether it's providing me with opportunities to make mistakes. And I'd have to say that's a big one. But also to get us to a point of self-esteem early in our lives, because they provided with all of the lower expectations of Maslow's hierarchy. We knew where we were going to eat. We had a place, we were loved, we were cared for. So self-esteem came very early. And I can look at it from that analytical sense now and say, as many friends as we had, their opinions of us did not matter as much as knowing that we were loved by a family and had a place to go.
And I know you have a daughter and a grandchild, and the little that I have insight into, it's like a beautiful reciprocity infinity loop. Like she's working with you to support your work to get out in the world. And I know it's like a sweet, sweet connection with this little being who's new. Yeah.
Well, it's what I would call my why. So I would invite any leader or anyone listening to this is, do you know your why? The old statement that I learned many years ago was, find your why before it finds you. And I would have to say there were times when the why that found me woke me up and really said, this is what's really important. All that other stuff, So when you get down to those moments and you begin to recognize, so when my phone lights up, I see my why because my granddaughter's face is there, my daughter's face is there. That puts it in perspective,
Yeah.
So I can go to, imagine if every time my phone lit up, I had my balance sheet there,
I mean,
and some of us do that. First thing in the morning, we go on and we look at, okay, what did the market do last night versus how's my daughter today, right?
Yeah.
Did my daughter eat? Did she sleep well, right?
Yeah.
Because if that is the case, then maybe the market did well. Because even if the market did well and they didn't eat or sleep well, then I missed it, right?
Exactly. It goes back to what you're saying about what questions are we asking ourselves and each other. Really important. part of the process right now.
And I think there's and I don't want to be so hardline on it. It's dependence and independence. What are the dependent, independent factors? We have to make decisions. These things are dependent upon that. These things are independent of those things, and making decisions based on that, rather than everything's dependent upon me doing certain things because that's the way it is. That's where the relationships come in again. When we're interdependent, interrelated, then those levels of dependency and codependency begin to have less impact and less of a struggle, right? Because we're not attached to those anymore. Because I may not be able to do this on my own, but I have relationships that can help me with it. As I've helped them, they will help me. And this past week for me was a perfect example of that, where I was able to make a phone call and people showed up to assist in a time of need where I couldn't be in a place to be of assistance. But that's relational. And that didn't come overnight. That came from an investment of time and integrity, of being and spending quality moments, right? Investing in those relationships. So the return on integrity was, okay, we'll be there.
The ROI was there. So if you were to, as you know, we explore, once a year, and it's not enough, but we do a panel of wisdom of our elders, and we bring in some of our elders in to talk about our work. And this year we've been exploring right relationship, as you know. And I know your elders have had such an influence on you. And what do you think in this moment, or like, I'll take this question either way. What would you want to say to them to honor them? Or what do you think they'd share with you or with us right in this moment?
Well, first of all, I thank them profusely for recognizing an empty coconut, which at the time thought it was full of itself. Right. And I have to go back to the story of having to lose my sight to gain my vision. Sometimes we have to let go of those things to be there. But that to have them there to help polish the lens a little bit, say, here, this is what you're really looking at, to have that guidance and direction. But then also to give us the freedom, give me the freedom to experience and explore it with that support. In other words, go find out. They never just said, do this.
Yeah.
Right. They're always leading by inquiry, which is something I've adopted and live by, which is leading by inquiry, as well as adopting appreciative inquiry as a way of being. Rather than looking for what we don't like, let's find out what we do like. What is the thing that we both commonly appreciate? Because in focusing on that, those things that we don't begin to fall away, or we can compartmentalize them. And so I would thank them, because in many ways they had themselves reached their age where they could now self-actualize. And I was just fortunate to be the last one standing with them in many cases.
Wow.
Just out of service, because that was the way I was brought up, to be in service to them. So I wasn't there asking for anything.
Yeah.
But I was there in service to them, helping them with their lives and with their whatever they needed at the moment. And in that proximity, they were ready to plant seeds in what they thought was fertile ground, while others were ready to do the weeding of all the old stuff so that the new stuff could take root. So I would ask anyone's ancestors those questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of them are just waiting to relieve themselves of all this stuff, good, bad, or indifferent.
I agree.
Here is my gift to you.
Yeah.
Right? Use it as you will. May it benefit you. And if it doesn't, let it go. And I think that's the big part, is that they were willing to let me fall on my face, but they pointed me in the right direction to fall.
And they offered ho'oponopono. Right. And they offered ho'oponopono when you did fall. There was like forgiveness and love. And it wasn't about like making you wrong, but it was about supporting your becoming, your human becoming.
Right. Yeah, the old statement was we love the child, but correct the behavior,
Mm.
right? I may not like your behavior. Your behavior may be miscalculating, but somehow we need to make an adjustment in that expectation and or my own behavior, because you are a reflection of me as my child, my grandchild, my employee. So if I'm not liking what I'm seeing in front of me, then I need to check my behavior, because somehow I've given permission, guidance, and direction.
So I know I could talk to you for hours and hours more. And I mean this, I hope I get to spend more time with you, learning from you. These teachings and the way you teach them are so accessible and applicable, I feel, to like the world that I'm navigating and bringing humanity into the workplace.
Yes.
And so first of all, can you tell us how folks can find you? They're going to want to learn more about the work that you do, support it. And I know you do mentoring as well, and perhaps, hire those services.
Well, thank you for that. I'm very fortunate to have a daughter you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
who has kind of set me up in social media, because I'm no good there. So I have a website, ramsaytaum.com. That's AYRAMSAYTAUM.com, which is associated with my consulting program called Life Enhancement Institute of the Pacific, or LEI of the Pacific. So they're associated. And there's some information there, their calendars and activities. But I think your listeners will find that what I'm saying is true. I'm not a marketer. I'm not marketing stuff. It's just kind of like, here's where I am, here's what I'm doing. More importantly, I don't go where I'm not invited. So I'm always open to being invited. We met at an event where I was invited to participate in. And so I'm open to being invited to companies, communities, individuals, to work with them at wherever they aspire to be at that point in time. I really don't have anything to say until it's asked. I really never know what I'm going to say until I say it.
Yeah, it's coming through you. You're like channeling it. It's definitely like being downloaded. That's my experience of you and your wisdom.
Well, thank you, because I kind of feel that way. It's easier not having to carry stuff around.
Yeah.
There's enough baggage in my life, right, to have to carry around. What am I going to say next? Or what do I unfortunately, I don't operate that way. It's like, you ask a question and something comes. And if it doesn't, then it wasn't meant to. So that process also goes into the classes. There are programs which can be customized, by the way. We customize programs for companies and organizations, depending on where they're at and what their trajectory might be or where they want to be at. And that usually requires some time with decision makers, designers, and we design things together. So it's truly a co-design experience. Then there are the one-on-one sessions, like the one that you shared, we shared together, where people can go a little deeper. And that's
super valuable, people. Super valuable. Like, talk about an ROI. Save me probably hundreds of thousands of dollars and spiritual debt. Acquiring a lot more of it.
Yeah, well, you're building spiritual equity,
Yes.
So it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So there are those opportunities, and my daughter again has set up the Calendly program for those types of things, and they come in various forms, packages like most people do. But I'm pretty responsive to what the community's at. I am on Facebook under Kumu Ramsay, or Kumu Ramsay Taum. See, I think she has an Instagram page for me as well. Something to that.
And we'll put all of this in the show notes. So don't worry. You don't need to remember it all. It's all going to be there. But ultimately, what I'm hoping is if this information and this knowledge and wisdom resonated, people will reach out to you, because there's just so many ways to work with you.
Yeah, thank you. And there'll be events coming up. I'll share that with you as well. You can share with communities. So there are numerous ways. But I think my greatest aspiration is bring people to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And meet with me here in immersions or experiences. We call them huaka'i. So huaka'i is to experience, explore, that kind of thing. The one I'm really excited about is it's called Spending a Day with Kumu.
Woo! Ooh,
Yeah.
that sounds amazing.
And see what happens, right? So a day being 24 hours. So any configuration of how we can break out 24 hours, whether it's 8 3-hour days or what have you. And we really go into what's important to people and how to move through all that. And really, it's always just reciprocity.
Yeah.
Our exchanges, things get revealed. No attachments, no judgments. Only, as far as I'm concerned, love and aloha.
Mm,
That allows me to stay free, unattached, and open to what needs to come. So, if
amazing.
your listeners find that that's appealing to them, I'd welcome the opportunity to work with them, and with you
Thank
more
you.
too.
Yes, please. Please, please. In honor of your elders, in honor of the land
Mm.
that you and your lineage have been stewards of, how is the Hawaiian kingdom in this moment? How can it support this restoration of right relationship where we are? In our final words here for today.
Yeah. Thank you for that. As I would say to the listeners in our prior conversation, I think it's about focusing on the ends and not just the means. And that's where we are. We're really focusing on the restoring of order, correcting, putting into proper order the relationship that the kingdom, uh, the family that is responsible for that, can be placed back into proper relationship to serve the land that feeds and the people that are all part of that same land.
Mm.
And I think we're at a time in the world where these kinds of relationships matter. It's not just about Hawaii. It's just not about restoring the kuleana, the responsibilities of the royal house, who I have the great pleasure of serving. But it's really about all of us that uh, associate to this place as family. And wherever we are in the world, that we realize that we're all living on island Earth. And as island Earth, we are all islanders. And so the perspective here is that how do we restore the health of this island, these islands in the middle of the sea? Because in doing so, we restore order on island Earth.
Hmm.
It's a planetary experience. So we invite anyone interested in learning more about that and maybe facilitating and supporting it, especially if they have any love for Hawaii and what it stands for and what it could be as far as a beacon of peace, hope, prosperity, and being in true relationship again with Mother Earth, and one another. And so that's a big part of it. But I would definitely say focusing on the ends, not the means, especially in our businesses and in our families. Sometimes when we get focused only on the means, we just get meaner, right?
Yeah.
It's our
So true.
demeanor. Demeanor is a real important part of this.
So
So
true.
I would close by saying, live, be, and share aloha, which means being kind, finding ways to work in solidarity, working together, maybe agreeing to disagree without being disagreeable, being pleasant about it, being available, but also experiencing or sharing humility, recognizing the brilliance in others, which then reflects your own brilliance, because we're allowing others to express and share their deepest and most important thoughts and feelings. And above all, being patient, being tolerant, but persistent. In an Hawaiian, that word is ahonui, which is embedded the word honu, the turtle, which everybody loves turtles.
Yeah.
But ahonui means to take a deep breath and dive deep when you need to, when the surface seems to be choppy and things are unruly. But like the turtle, take a deep breath, dive to the bottom, wait for a moment, and resurface to breathe again. Patience and tolerance, but above all, kindness. So this is aloha. I would share that. And I hope that everyone can find the time, the energy, and the focus to live, be, and share aloha. So thank you, your
Thank
ancestors,
you.
and your descendants for allowing us to share aloha today.
Thank you so much, Kumu Ramsay. You are such a gift, and these teachings are such a gift. And I'm just smiling, like my full body smile. I just can't even hit stop because I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
And I wish there was another word other than grateful because I don't have it's not a word in the English language. So thank you for sharing the aloha.
You're welcome. Well, the
And
word in Hawaiian
teachings.
is mahalo.
Mahalo.
Mahalo is I receive this ma internally, that life-giving breath, that spirit of ha, and I'm now joined alo to that mahalo, which is a deeper expression than just saying thanks. It's
Mahalo.
It's a commitment to care for this time together. Thank you. Mahalo.
Mahalo.